In this lecture, I'll show you how we validate user input or test different conditions in Solidity. In our smart contract, we want to require that every user sends a value greater than, let's say, 0.01 Ether or something like that. It's not normal for somebody to send 0A. Now, if somebody wants to send 0A to our contract, that person will be added to that dynamic array, to the player's dynamic array, and the transaction will be executed, will be mined. We want to validate the way amount the user sent to our contract. That amount should be greater than a specific value. Inside our payable function that is automatically called, using an if, we test the value the user sends. If msg.value, this is a global variable that holds the value sent with this transaction. In this case, the value the user sent to our contract. So if msg.value greater than, and now I must specify the value in way. We can use the online converter to see how many way are in, let's say, 0.001 Ether. So let's search for our online converter, way converter. So let's say I require that any player sends at least 0.01 Ether. And I have this big value, this big number from here. I copy paste this number in our contract source code. This is a little bit complicated. This number doesn't represent anything for me. So I don't know, looking at this number, how much Ether is required. So instead of using this number, I can simply write something like this: 0.01 Ether. Solidity permits something like that. So if msg.value greater than 0.01 Ether, then I'll add the address to dynamic array. Else, throw. Throw stops the transaction. I have a warning. The warning says that throw is deprecated in favor of revert, require, and assert. Let's see how we can use require instead of if. So I delete the lines I've just added. This is my initial code. And I write require msg.value greater than or equal to, let's say, 0.01 Ether. This code does the same as the previous one that validated the amount sent using the if statement, but it's much better. We can see there is no warning. What does the require statement do? The require statement receives one argument that evaluates to a Boolean value of true or false. If that argument or expression evaluates to false, all transaction changes are reverted. In our case, if this expression evaluates to false, require consumes all guess till this point. So if I had some operations here, I don't know, something like that, int a, the guess for these operations is consumed, but no all transaction guess. So only the guess till the require statement, and all transaction changes are reverted. So the transaction stops here. Let's use the require statement one more time. For example, we want that only the manager to be able to get the contract balance, to view the contract balance. We should write here require, and the test condition is msg.sender, the account that calls this function, is equal to manager. Okay, what happens here? If this condition from here evaluates to false, the transaction stops and all changes are reverted. So the line number 22 that returns the balance will be executed only if this expression evaluates to true. And that means the person that calls this function must be the manager that has been set using the constructor with the value of the address that deployed the contract. So let's test our contract. From the first account from here, I deploy my contract, and using the second account, I try to send 0 way to my contract. 0 way. Okay, we can see here we have an error. Why? Because the require statement from here stopped the transaction. Now if I try to send a value that is greater than 0.01 Ether, the transaction won't return an error. So let's select from here Ether and I send, let's say, 1 Ether. It doesn't matter what account I use, let's say the second account. As you can see, the transaction didn't return an error, so the transaction has been executed successfully. Now let's test the getBalance function. So I try to call the getBalance function from an account that is not the manager. So let's see who is the manager. The manager is the account address that starts with CA. So I think the first account from here. Yeah, the first account from here. So the first account, the manager can call, is allowed to call the getBalance function. This is the contract balance. But let's say the last account can't call the getBalance function. We have an error. Why? Because this expression returned false and the transaction stopped. So require is very important in Solidity. This is how we impose security and we test different conditions.